But now what we're trying to do is measure stories. Are we giving those opportunities to those families? How are people putting dinner on the table? How are they sending their kids to college? How are they sending them to trade school? How are they getting involved in construction? Those are the storylines that we're trying to measure now, and it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, we can do movies, we can do stories, we can do interviews. Dollars is just a byproduct of the efforts, the intentional efforts that we've been trying to gain ground on.
Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm going to keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman, founder and CEO of the Behind Your Back sales company, where it's our mission in life to help you sell more, faster, at higher margins, and have more fun doing it. As for this podcast, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. Now, this episode is brought to you today by our friends at Capital One Trade Credit. If you want to sell more, increase cash flow while decreasing risk and leveraging an extremely powerful digital platform to make it easier for your customers to buy from you, sounds like a pretty good deal. You want to check out Capital One Trade Credit. Check it out. See if it's a fit for you. How? Well, you can simply Google Capital One Trade Credit as expected. Now, I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Josh Adams. He is the Vice President of Operations at NPL Construction Company, a utility construction company. Now, Josh Adams earned his BS in construction management from Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. Mascot? The Braves. Bradley Braves. He then began his construction career at Del Webb, worked at Lennar, and then I crossed paths with him when I was an area purchasing manager for Pulte Homes, buying material and labor for 7 markets in the Midwest. And I can tell you, Josh Adams was one of the guys that you went to understand how professionals dealt with contractors, dealt with manufacturers. This is a guy who knew how to work collaboratively and really think analytically to understand the best value. And this is one of the conversations that we have about value and the cost to serve and building alliances with the people that you serve on a daily basis to grow together over the long term. Now, as you'll hear, Josh and I talk about bureaucracy and leading in environments that could have a lot of red tape and how to do that effectively and building momentum and achieving big goals, because that is exactly what Josh has done. Now, NPL has got over 6,000 employees. They operate in 28 different states. They are a large company by any measure, and many of their customers are public entities. So when you mash these two entities together, I think the risk for bureaucracy and red tape is at an all-time high. And this is why I'm so excited to share this conversation with Josh, because for leaders at all levels to understand where there's risk for things to get bogged down and to slow down and to lose momentum and lose hope, that's a real risk, especially in today's environment where there's so many converging forces that seem designed to hold us down. And that's the pandemic and supply chain issues and labor issues. And as you will hear, Josh is going to talk about how there's always a path to work together collaboratively, intentionally, and intelligently, and find a way through. So there's a lot of territory that we cover here, and Josh offers a lot of insights around generating alliances, improving workforce development programs, driving cost out of systems that you have with your best customers to increase value. And we talk about this alchemy that can happen between improving networking, generating new ideas, and community service, combining those all in a unique way to really stand out from the competition and allow your organizations to grow in a really diverse and profitable way. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Josh Adams, VP of Operations at NPL Construction Company. Mr. Josh Adams, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bradley. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun here. I've been looking forward to talking to you. After we had talked initially, it's funny how much more I notice the public utility construction that is just going on in general. So going back a few months when we initially reconnected, I've been jotting down a whole bunch of questions, but I want to start with this, is that obviously NPL, been a very successful company, over 5 decades old, 6,000 plus employees. You're almost in 30 different states. On one hand there, sometimes it's challenging to lead in environments where they've had a lot of success, and then you kind of have some of this necessary bureaucracy that kind of comes in a little bit. So that's like on one side. But then your customer base, now I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but in my experience in building, dealing with public utilities sometimes includes some red tape in there. I'm going to ask you this, is how have you been able to lead effectively and manage such growth, and to kind of avoid what are some of those things that can really slow you down with bureaucracy and red tape and all the things that come with scale?
Very good point. Been with a lot of different organizations, and I think that I've had the luxury at NPL of having NPL be a very small organization when I first joined over a decade ago, learning the fundamentals of the business, learning how to serve those customers, learning how to serve them very, very well. And then as we've gotten larger and some of that bureaucratic red tape kind of starts creeping in a little bit. And I think you really have to keep those things in perspective and say, at the end of the day, we are still a construction utility contractor trying to perform for our customer. I think you have to kind of navigate through some of those things that are necessary evils through process and procedure. At the end of the day, we are a regulated entity. The PHMSA, or the Department of Transportation, that regulates all pipeline activities, we have to meet those criteria at a bare minimum. But then, at the Century level or NPL corporate level, there are things as we've grown, we've had to become accustomed to. It's very, very important that at the end of the day, we don't lose focus on what we do. We have to provide a service to our customer. We have to do it within the regulatory bodies or the regulatory constituents that we serve. And at the end of the day, we need to take care of our employees. And so you balance all of those things and try to navigate through them to say, hey, how are we going to continually improve while meeting these new requirements?
Yeah, was there anything specific that maybe fell on your not to-do list that you learned, again, coming from your background in home building and then some light construction? You manage your own business, you ran your own business. Obviously, you moved up quickly within another large organization on the building side. Obviously, it's still construction. And I think when I hear you say that, it's also like, hey, at the end of the day, we're a construction company. We got to do it with quality. We got to do it with safety. But was there anything different that you said, okay, the rules of this game are played a little bit differently, and I got to adjust maybe the mindset or maybe some leadership tactics to be more effective?
Yeah, I think your analogy there is very, very on point. I equate it to playing baseball and softball. You might play with a different size ball, but at the end of the day, there's still 3 outs. You're still pitching a ball. You're still trying to hit a ball and field a ball and score runs. And that's really the difference, I think, between the utility sector and any other sort of construction, is that the rules and the challenges are all the same. At the end of the day, you're just trying to put the best possible team on the field to execute. The difference, I think, has been this, is that as construction companies have grown, we're notoriously behind other industries in terms of our advancement and the way we look at things. But the one fundamental thing that I think has been the differentiator in the utility sector is this alliance type mindset. Understanding that both sides have something to win and both sides have something to lose. So how can you do that most efficiently? By working together, being transparent, having this alliance type mentality would say, hey, when you do these types of things, Mr. Utility Contractor or utility owner, it costs me a lot of money. If you want to drive cost out of the business, let's work on something more sustainable. Let's work on alliances. Let's work on a blanket type contract where I'm not having to hire 3 people today, lay off 4 people tomorrow, downsize my facility. Can we have some consistency and some robustness in the way that we approach common problems? And it's a two-way street. The thing that I've been blessed with at least Nicor Gas is that, we've had an alliance with them for 15 years. An alliance means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The utility sector is regulated by, and at least in Illinois, by the Citizens Utility Board, by the Illinois Commerce Commission, so on and so forth. We've been able to prove consistently to those entities that the bid buy mentality is not always the best value for the consumers who are purchasing gas. If you can have consistency, if you can have a competitively bid contract, but drive cost out of the business through this type of alliance type mindset, the efficiencies and the cost reductions are exponential. So that's really been something that's much, much different than anything that I've seen in a typical building or construction type atmosphere. It's really about driving value.
Yeah. Well, it made me think about something I've spent a lot of time now thinking about and working with our clients on, but it's also something I learned when I came into a purchasing and a buying role where you worked. And somebody had told me early on is, don't be afraid to ask that question of, are we currently getting your best price? And I remember I bet I was in the department for 90 days. It was early. And I just, innocently asked this question. The owner sitting across from me says, no, you're not. Hard stop. Let the silence sit there. And I said, all right, well, begs the question, why aren't we getting the best price? And he says, great question. We love you guys. We love working with you. There are multiple things that you do that add overall cost on our end without providing value. Are you interested to know what those are? I'm like, I think that answer is yes. So they led you down this conversation about the cost to serve there, which I think was so powerful. So, but I want to ask you there, sticking on this idea of an alliance, and maybe some folks who are listening might say, hey, Josh, I hear you, but we tried an alliance back in 2015. It didn't work. Or, we tried it 20 years ago and it didn't work. Are there some first principles that come to mind? Because alliance can mean a lot of different things. You said, hey, fundamentally, if you're going to think about an alliance, these are the first things that I would address. And if you can get agreement on these, then you can move on to maybe smaller or ancillary or subsequent things. But this is the foundation of a successful alliance in your experience.
Yeah, I think that having an organizational structure behind that alliance, an executive leadership team, because if you're not bought in at the top, at the very top of the organization to say, hey, they're going to champion this, they're behind it, they believe in this, any type of alliance or any type of alliance discussion is going to ultimately fail. But we've been very blessed to have that long-standing tenure within our customer base that's behind it on both sides of the executive leadership teams, from NPL and in this particular case, the customer that I serve is Nicor Gas. Foundational structure is very, very important. But then you have to have teams that are committed to it. And you have to make a very, very conscious effort towards identifying what those costs are, what those problems might be on both sides of the table. Again, as a contractor, we may not be perfect. There may be things that they want or expect of us. And so identifying those and then putting metrics behind them and having the scorecard to where you're actually measuring yourself on those performance objectives and then sharing that information through strategic meetings. We have strategic alliance teams. We have OIT teams, which is operational implementation teams. And then we have an executive steering team meeting, and we're sharing at all 3 of those levels on the progress of those challenges. And each year we identify different things because the business changes. It doesn't mean that we quit measuring something that we did 2 or 3 years ago, but it just means that maybe our business looks a little bit different. There's new things that we need to implement, and we have a metric in place to measure them.
Yeah, I can only imagine, though, in terms of customer intimacy, what a better way to truly get closer to a customer than to share costs, to share metrics, and to figure out how we do what we do and how you do what they do. Have you learned anything or any advice that you might give to folks who say, hey, this sounds good up front, but when you have to sit in front of your best customer and say, the way you guys are doing this is killing us, sometimes there's this risk. Maybe we look like a martyr. Maybe they don't agree. And now I'm putting at risk the relationship with our number one customer, one of our top customers. What advice or lessons have you learned on how to do this in a way that's constructive, that allows both sides of that alliance to move forward?
I talked about that executive structure that we have. So we've got the executives, we've got a steering team, and then we've got these operational implementation teams. And it really touches all levels of the organization. So imagine it this way. We identify some problems in the business that we need to target. We put a business case around that, and then our operations teams go out and start working. And this is at the field level of the organization.
Okay.
And in particular, maybe for how do we execute gas tie-ins at a higher level to drive costs out of the business. If we've had delays, we've got trench shoring box that may sit in the ground for longer than it should, or maybe it pushes everything else down the road to where we don't have enough crews. Maybe we need different tooling. Maybe it could be a whole host of things. But when we start at the field level, that's where the rubber meets the road. Those people know what challenges they're facing in the field. And so if they can articulate the challenges that are happening, move it up to the next steering team and have them vet it, and then ultimately present it to the executive team. Now it's a multifaceted approach where everybody can agree, beat these ideologies up as they kind of move up the food chain. And by the time it reaches the executive team, there's a very clear idea of what the challenges are, what the impacts are, and what the cost savings or cost impacts may be. So I think by having a broad brush and having different teams work on it, you get buy-in at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, I like that. Is that how it typically always works? What you just kind of described is kind of that bottom up. And when guys on the front line say, you want me to do 15% more tie-ins? Yeah, I got some ideas. That's very different than someone sitting up, even if they're really well connected and there's good communication throughout the organization, of saying, hey, let me think about some ways that we can do this, and let me send some ideas down versus bottom up. Is that accurate to say generally that process is more bottom up driven?
I would say the majority of it is, but believe me, I would say probably 60% comes from bottom up, and I think 40% comes top down. And, the executives actually have a different look on it. I mean, they aren't as close to the field problems, but they bring some real cultural, this is where diversity kind of comes into play, is how can we impact communities? How can we, they're challenging us at a different level and pushing this kind of down to the field level to start integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental stewardship, all these types of things. So we see it both ways, and both of them are highly, highly effective when done well.
Now that's a perfect segue. I want to frame this for you. So you join NPL. One of your first meetings is back in 2009. You're meeting with NICOR, and you are talking about diversity and inclusion at the time. You guys are 100% self-perform at the time. You walk away from that meeting thinking and feeling what?
So imagine this. We are a contractor that performs everything. Directional boring, hydrovacking, gas main installation, anything that they ever ask of us, we'll go out and invest in the pieces of equipment and go and execute. That's all we knew how to do. Like if a customer asked you to do something, our model was find a way to get it done. We walked into this meeting and they basically said, look, we want 5% of everything that we spend with you to go to a diverse organization. We walked out of that meeting room very deflated. How do we do this? We don't know any diverse contractors. We self-perform everything. Subcontracting was not in our DNA. We didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so basically we did have a handful of vendors that we used, and we started there and we started knocking on doors. We're saying, hey, are you veteran owned? Are you a minority owned? Do you belong to any of these organizations? And, of the handful of suppliers that we did have, not a one of them were, a certified, registered, diverse organization. So I think we started by kind of identifying, could you be? And there were a handful there that we helped get certifications. And so we started that process. But I mean, literally, when you're not subcontracting, but 2 to 3%, it's pretty hard to achieve a 5% diversity goal. So we had to really look at our business and say, okay, how does our business broke up? At that time, I think about 80% of our cost was labor cost.
Okay.
You got some G&A, some profits and taxes, and all the things that go along with it. we really didn't have a roadmap. And it really took a long time to get some traction, but we started knocking on doors. And by doors, I'm talking about advocacy groups, Federation of Women Contractors, the NMSDC, local chapters. In Chicagoland, we have HICEA. We've got different organizations that had contractors of various things. They weren't all construction. Some of them may have been apparel suppliers. Some of them may be administrative support. We started just knocking on doors and saying, hey, can you help us here? Can you help us there? And one thing that we quickly realized what our core business is. Our core business is utility construction, payroll, apparel, back office functions, even safety and quality. We quickly learned that there was a lot of efficiencies to be gained there. Some of the things that we were doing, we weren't necessarily the best at, but there were people who were better at us. And so, while there might have been a cost premium to doing some of these things outside of the organization, we made up for it in efficiencies. And so I think it's an important, anytime I talk to any type of organization, it's very easily to say, well, diversity has cost too much money. It can if you don't do it properly. Mm-hmm. But if you look at what your core business is and what the efficiencies that somebody who's specialized in those particular scopes of work can do, you can quickly offset it.
So tell me about the time horizon you guys set. So you guys leave that meeting, you're somewhat deflated. You start thinking, how do we even do this? As you started trying to figure out, it's like, well, hey, we're going to figure this out, right? And it sounds like, well, maybe what you described wasn't in your DNA. This is what is we're really good at figuring stuff out. Everything is figure outable, so to speak. Mm-hmm. What was your time horizon, or did NICOR say, hey, here's our goal in 5 years or 10 years? And the reason I ask is obviously there's lots of conversations going on with some of our clients who are working with largely the Hispanic demographic, and they're trying to say, okay, how could this tie into some of these initiatives that we have into diversity, equity, and inclusion? Our goal is 6 to 12, max 18 months. And I just said, hey, small company, big company, small dreams, big dreams. 6 months goes by like that. 12 months goes by like that. Like, what's the time horizon? Do you remember how far you guys were thinking out? Because now that you're more a decade away and have had incredible success, to give away the punchline, I'm just curious from a leader's perspective on how you thought about how to just kind of continually, methodically work your way towards a goal.
Yeah, I think it's very, very easy to be tempted into putting a timeline or a goal or objective out there. I would tell you that it's been a long road. A decade later, we have 106 different vendors that we deal with here locally in the state of Illinois who have an opportunity to collect a paycheck from us. And those are all diverse organizations. 106, each one of them are a veteran, minority, or woman-owned business. By all accounts, extremely successful. When we didn't realize how we could get to 3%, today as we sit here, we're at 33% of every dollar we generate goes to those organizations.
Wow.
And beyond that, we're mentoring and developing some of our competition. Those are huge, huge stakes. It takes a lot to have the faith to do that. But the biggest thing that you mentioned there was really creating, when we stepped back and looked at those things, we said we have to create something sustainable. We can go out and have a project and find a vendor and get 30, 40% diversity on that. But after that project's done, if we didn't have a sustainable program, it wasn't going to be successful for the long haul. And so we really broadened our horizons. We peeled back every layer of our organization and really made it our culture. When an opportunity comes about, our superintendents know today that they need to find diversity or a diverse contractor that they need to partner with. And we've got a laundry list or a big library to pull from, but they're constantly challenging themselves to find new opportunities to create that diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would tell you that it's not just about measuring the dollars and cents that we're spending. It truly is about creating opportunities for families in this marketplace, in the communities in which we work. And that's really the big storyline. I talked about metrics earlier, and it's really easy to measure dollars and cents. But now what we're trying to do is measure stories. Are we giving those opportunities to those families? How are people putting dinner on the table? How are they sending their kids to college? How are they sending them to trade school? How are they getting involved in construction? Those are the storylines that we're trying to measure now. And it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, we can do movies, we can do stories, we can do interviews. Dollars is just a byproduct of the efforts, the intentional efforts that we've been trying to gain ground on.
Yeah. Is that phrasing to measure stories? Is that something you just said, or is this known as kind of an initiative of, or like a general goal that you guys are working towards?
Admittedly, we've been very poor about it. We tried to kind of roll up our sleeves and said, this is just the right thing to do, and kind of put our heads down and say, we know we're doing these things, but we don't want to brag about it. The reality is if you're not out telling your story to the ICC, the Illinois Commerce Commission, or to their customers, you're not reaping the true benefits of it. It becomes very hard when they go for a rate case to defend just dollars and cents or how much you spend. I mean, those are easy metrics, but there's a story behind those dollars that we're spending. And that's really why is diversity important? Well, diversity is important because these are people who rely on the gas company to have gas supplied at their homes. It's really important that they have reliability first and foremost, but there's almost a public perception that if I'm going to be paying for this, it should be coming from people who are actively in our community, supporting our workplaces, that are servicing these lines. And that's really what we're upheld to do every single day, is make sure that we're giving back to communities and supporting those communities, not just this large construction organization of 6,000 people in 28 states. No, we're here. We're a local contractor. We're investing. We live in these communities. Why not give back to them? And that's really the spirit of the program.
Yeah. And I can imagine also, I think you guys have a really well produced, I'll also say entertaining, inspirational video where you're telling these different stories. But the broader need is, and I know this is not going to come to news to anyone who's listening to this, is we need more talent, period. No matter where they come from, what their cultural background is, what language they speak, if they're coachable, and they're passionate about the industry, we need more talent in this industry. And I think this is where it starts when there's several guys who are saying they helped grow my organization and we never could have done this without their guidance. I think that's a great story. And I don't know, obviously I'm all in on the podcast medium, but like an Npl Partner Alliance program story, these stories about folks who had small businesses and you helped grow them to employ more people. I mean, that's really powerful. And maybe that's a question I want to ask next is just, I remember just doing this on small scale when we were working together and the Great Recession hit, the unionization in general in Chicago. It was really a struggle in home building. And there's a lot of new folks who said, hey, I'm going to start my own business. They were craftsmen. They were great at what they did. They knew the cost, they knew the talent, they knew the people. But just from an overall how we do business, from branding to marketing to invoicing to making it easy to do a sales call, I remember all of us just racking our heads like, how do we help these people help us? Can you tell us a little about the training and the time investment and the mindset that goes to, this isn't even about construction. This is business acumen 101 and what you guys obviously know how to do at your scale over 5 decades in business. How can we help the small guy who's got 2 guys who have 1 truck and a dream to grow a business? How do you bring them along to do business with somebody like you?
Fair question. And I mean, look, I think this is most sincere form of flattery is imitation. So back in our days when we had some partner alliances, I stole that model and I started it here at NPL. And so we created the Npl Partner Alliance. And basically it was bringing in small, diverse organizations. And we're talking 1, 2, 3 people organizations and pairing them up with some of these larger, more mature national organizations. And so we started 6 years ago by bringing 15 different organizations into the room and just saying, hey, we're going to build this off of 3 fundamental principles. It's education, community, and diversity. We need to be involved with the communities in which we're working. We need to be promoting diversity at every opportunity. And this education piece is we need to, small businesses and large businesses need to learn from each other what the challenges are. And so we came in, and it's completely run by these organizations. We just facilitate it. And we have a great moderator that kind of flushes us all this out. But each time we meet 4 times a year, and it's an all-day event, is they're picking the education topics. We're talking about how they're incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion in their businesses. And then we go do a community service project. And I will tell you, the community service projects at the end of those are the most rewarding things that you'll ever see. You know, in 6 years, we've done almost 2,500 volunteer hours with different organizations in the communities, from homeless veterans to soup kitchens to park districts to animal care. Whatever the group is passionate about, we kind of spread the wealth on those things. But at the end of the day, we started this 6 years ago, and took a while to find our cadence. But what we're finding now is all of these businesses are working together as one. They're working business to business. Some of them are competitors, but they're sourcing one to say, hey, I've got a shortfall over here. Can you help me out? Yeah, come on over. Hey, I need a truck over here. The trucking firm's coming to support them. And so what we found is that by giving them these opportunities to engage with one another, they're helping each other, they're growing their businesses, they're supporting one another. It is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen when you can bring them into a room and they all feel comfortable and they all start working together.
Well, I've noticed this too, in that carving out time to really more intentionally give back and be involved with community service, is that there's this, I think, this kind of positive flywheel that happens is when you're doing these things, you're putting yourself in a different environment. You network in a different way, and it's more about, what do you care about? Why are you here? You're doing something that makes you feel good, and you're giving back. And inevitably, you're sharing some ideas. And that alchemy, I think, is really powerful. But I think, to your point, if you can put the center of that community service, not that there's anything wrong with going to a bar and having a couple beers and networking that way, but when you can give back and network and share ideas, and it's kind of like, hey, all of us need to grow. If we're all going to grow, how do we do that together? I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think this group has clearly demonstrated that. I mean, one thing that we haven't done yet is measure that business-to-business growth that they're working on. But I think that's something that's on the radar. And we're constantly adding new members. I mean, this is a very mature group now. I think of it back when we started it 6 years ago and how long it kind of took to gain some momentum. But now, there's people willingly and actively in line waiting to join this group. And so the more the merrier. But I think it just goes to a testament to say, hey, people are talking about this. They're talking about the opportunities and the way that it's improved their businesses and what they're learning from it. And the best thing that we can see out of that is that people want to join this group now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exciting. I got 2 more questions for you. And I think the first one here is off kind of what you just shared there. There's one gentleman on your video where the obvious question that was off screen was, how did you hear about NPL and how did you hear about this opportunity? And he's like, a buddy of mine, a neighbor, knew a guy and told me about it. And I went in and talked to him, and I've been working with him for X number of years. And it got me thinking about just the word of mouth marketing. And I think whenever there's opportunity and there's growth and there's an authenticity to the opportunity, that thing just grows organically. So obviously you guys are doing stuff right there. I'm curious, is there anything you're specifically doing, maybe bringing in marketing or anything that you're doing to try to deliberately and intentionally drive that word of mouth to have more stories just like that?
2 things. I think number one, we set the tone very early on. When we started this, and I've been with the diversity, equity, inclusion from the get-go at NPL, but I always said that we owe it to ourselves to meet with everybody who reaches out to us. The one shot. I mean, you can have multiple meetings, but we have to owe it to ourselves to be open and honest, to say we need to give everybody a chance. And when you do that, you may find that there's an organization that comes to you that you don't have a service for, but you learn about their content, their character, where they want to go, where they want to grow. And those opportunities, when they do come up, you go, oh yeah, I remember. And so you can reach back to them. So sometimes I call it planting seeds, is that, you can meet with a vendor.
Yeah.
Maybe nothing happens for a year, but 13 months in, you go, wow, I remember I met with so-and-so. I got that opportunity. Or you can find out where they want to grow. Maybe they don't perform that service, but they have an interest. And when that opportunity does present itself, very, very important to make sure that you keep those doors open and always give people an opportunity. The second thing is just keep that level of engagement up. We're still active members in 5 different local organizations and 4 different national organizations. We owe it to ourselves to make sure that we continually are in the communities, we're actively involved in those groups, and we're meeting with people because, shaking hands is still important. And in this world of COVID where everybody wants to, kind of retreat or work virtually, I'm all for it. I am all for it. But there are certain things that we can never substitute on, and that is relationship building. And so you can tell I'm very passionate about those 2 things, is making sure that you're still active in front of this and giving people opportunities. You have to do those things.
Yeah, I love what you said there about giving everyone a chance. I think going into those situations, knowing that there's going to be a certain percentage of these based on sheer probability that you're going to look back and think, not exactly a really useful way to spend my time. However, it's the overall investment and knowing you're not going to bat 1,000 and to go in there. And if we get 1 or 2 that we can leverage in the next year or 2, that's a trade-off we got to be willing to make. And I think most of the time the struggle is with executives and their calendar and how do we not get out of balance there? So you say, that's it, forget it. No more meetings with any of these guys for the next 6 months because I just got burned again. Or yeah, I think that's really powerful, giving everyone a chance. I know here, kind of your last question, Josh, I'll let you go. I want to know what sort of leadership lessons you find most valuable or most enjoyable to really impart or to emphasize when you're involved with the Boy Scouts of America. I know you're really involved with that and have been for a while. And I think getting some of these leadership principles and even identifying them as leadership principles for young men and women as they're coming up, knowing that leadership, it's a thing. Yes, there's an art to it, but there's also a science and there's fundamentals and there's things that we can really focus on and frameworks that can help people grow at every step of, someone's journey through life. What are some of the things that you really like to emphasize or focus on in that forum?
I'm going to flip the paradox here a little bit because I think it's really easy for somebody who's involved in whatever organization, but let's just say the Boy Scouts of America. I think it's really, I'm bullish on it. I think it's a great program. Certainly a lot of challenges in that program, very similar to what we face with the construction industries. How do we get people interested in doing those sorts of things? But one thing that I can tell you this is I learn more from them than I give to them. I am constantly, it's really easy to get down on the younger generation. I think I hear it all the time that they don't want to come to work. They don't want to get away from the video games. They don't want to do this. But when you really break it down and see what these young kids are capable of and the talents that they have, I am blown away at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, what some of these kids are capable of accomplishing. I watch it in their Eagle Scout projects. I sit in board of reviews with them, and they are incredibly thoughtful, incredibly talented, incredibly hardworking. And we just don't give kids enough credit today. So I'm extremely bullish on the future. We just need to foster those things. And that's why I think having empathy and having compassion and understanding what they want out of a job, that's what we have to learn as a construction industry.
Well, Josh, I feel like I should have seen this coming, and I think it's an appropriate way to end this conversation. But for someone like you, who's got kind of that, in my mind, in my experience with you, is that servant leader's mindset, which is, hey, yeah, what can I give? But also knowing that every step of the way, you can learn from everyone around you. And you're right. I agree. I think this idea that, hey, here's a job. Do you want it? Yes or no? To, hey, do your unique abilities and skills and what you're passionate about, can we find a place for you on our team? Because we need talent. And if we need to be flexible, we'll think about it. I think it's so important. So, man, this has been great. I've got a whole bunch of other questions here, but again, I appreciate you making time for this. And I would say congratulations to all the success you've had. For folks who may want to learn more about the Npl Partner Alliance or a little bit more information or where they can find the video, where's the best place for them to go to learn more and see if they can apply some of the things that worked for you in their own organizations?
2 websites. So our parent organization is Century Construction, Century with an I. Okay. So if you go to www.nextcentury.com, or www.gonpl.com. You can learn all about NPL, our other affiliates, and Century Construction Group.
Okay. Well, luckily we have show notes. We'll put those in there as well. But next Century with an I.com, and then gonpl.com would be places for people that can't wait and want to go check it out for themselves.
That's correct.
Awesome. Mr. Josh Adams, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, Bradley.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Josh Adams as much as I had recording it. And again, I think there's so many insights in there as it comes to developing alliances and improving workforce development, getting a diverse set of talent into our industry right now that is much needed. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think Josh and his team are doing a really great job of leading the way for the rest of us. Now, our goal here is to make this the best podcast you listen to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas for future shows or potential guests, or any sales fundamentals or builder scenarios you are struggling with. Don't hesitate to email me directly at bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Also, please link up with me on LinkedIn. That's what it's there for. And connect with me on Instagram at BehindYourBackCEO. And if you found this episode with Josh Adams valuable, please share it with your network or leave a review. Those mean more to us than you know. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Capital One Trade Credit. If you want to grow revenue while decreasing risk and increasing cash flow by leveraging an extremely powerful digital platform and a great partner, Capital One Trade Credit might be right for you. So Google Capital One Trade Credit and check it out. And with that, my friends, we will close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.